The cold barrel of a Vreth pulse rifle pressed against the back of my neck before I even heard the guards move. Human, you will come with us. I didn't argue. You don't argue with 7-foot armored predators whose species had glassed 2 colonies before Earth signed the accord. I dropped my cargo manifest, raised my hands, and walked. The Vreth flagship Dominion of Scales was not built for humans. The corridors were too tall, the gravity slightly heavier, the air thick with something that smelled like copper and ozone. My boots echoed on the obsidian floor as they marched me deeper into the ship. Past weapon bays. Past hatcheries sealed behind frosted glass. Past soldiers who stopped and stared at me the way predators stare at something they haven't decided to eat yet. I was a freight courier. 16 years of running supply routes between human colonies and allied species. I knew how to read a room, when to speak, when to go still. This was a going still moment. They pushed me through a set of doors that required 3 separate biometric scans to open. The chamber beyond was enormous, a throne room carved from a single piece of black stone, veined with something that pulsed faint gold. The ceiling was 40 feet high. The walls held weapons I didn't recognize. And, at the far end, on a throne that looked like it had been built from the bones of warships, sat Queen Vethra of the Vreth Dominion. I had seen her on broadcast. Every human diplomat had. She was the reason the Accord existed, the one Vreth leader who had chosen negotiation over annihilation when Earth's fleet arrived at the border, badly outgunned and desperately pretending otherwise. She was ancient by Vreth standards. Her scales were deep black with a silver sheen, her eyes a burning amber. She wore no crown. She didn't need one. She was also staring directly at me with an expression I could not read. The guards shoved me to my knees. I didn't fight it. The floor was cold and hard, and I focused on breathing evenly, on keeping my hands visible, on not doing anything that a predator species might interpret as aggression. You are the human who repaired the navigation array on Station Thresh 9, she said. Her voice was low, unhurried, the way a landslide is unhurried. Yes, I said. I kept my voice level. Courier designation Marin Cole. I was docked there when the array failed. I have an engineering background. I offered to help. You restored full function in 4 hours, she said. My technicians had estimated 3 days. Your technicians were working with the original architecture, I said carefully. I used a hybrid approach. Human-Vreth integration. It's not standard, but it holds. Silence. Queen Vethra stuttered me. I had been stuttered by aliens before, the Keth who communicate through scent and spend the first 20 minutes of any meeting just smelling you, the Dulhari who stare at your hands because they believe hands reveal character. The Vreth Queen stuttered the way a strategist studies a map. Looking for vulnerabilities, yes, but also looking for value. A small sound broke the silence from somewhere to my left. I turned instinctively, and immediately wished I hadn't. Perched on a smaller throne set slightly behind and, to the left of the Queen, was a young Vreth female. She couldn't have been more than a third of Vethra's age. Her scales were dark green with gold edging, not yet the full black of an adult. She was watching me with enormous amber eyes and she was holding, with deep concentration, a small mechanical device, one of my cargo tools, I realized with a jolt. She must have taken it from my dropped manifest bag when the guards brought me through. She had already partially disassembled it. She looked up, caught me staring, and held the device out toward me with an expression that was entirely, unmistakably, the universal face of a child showing an adult what they had done and waiting to see if they were in trouble. I looked back at the Queen. Queen Vethra's amber eyes were still fixed on me. The silence stretched long enough to become a physical thing. Then, she spoke 5 words that detonated inside my chest like a concussion round. You will marry my daughter. The mechanical device hit the floor with a small, sharp clatter. I stared at the Queen. The Queen looked back at me. The guards along the walls did not move. The child, the daughter, had gone completely still, staring at her own hands. My mouth opened. Nothing came out. The silence that followed was not the silence of confusion. It was the silence of a man whose entire understanding of the current situation had just been surgically removed and replaced with something he had no framework to process. Queen Vethra of the Vreth Dominion looked at my face, whatever expression had arranged itself there without my permission, and she laughed. It was a real laugh. Not political. Not performative. It started low and built into something genuine and rich, and, for one disoriented moment, it made her look almost human. The laugh faded. Her eyes sharpened again. "Sit," she said. "We have much to discuss." A guard brought a chair. An actual chair, sized for a human, which meant this meeting had been planned before I walked through those doors. That detail settled into my gut like cold iron. I sat. I kept my hands on my knees. I kept my breathing steady. I looked at the Queen and I waited, because the single most dangerous thing I could do right now was speak before I understood what was happening. The young Vreth, the daughter, had retrieved my cargo tool from the floor and was examining it again. Her movements were precise and careful. She hadn't looked at me since the announcement. "Her name is Kessa," Queen Vethra said. "She is my youngest. My only surviving child after the purge of Corthane." She did not say this with grief. She said it the way a soldier reports a position. "She is 11 cycles. By Vreth custom, she will require a bonded partner designate within 2 cycles." "A bonded partner designate," I repeated slowly. "A formal alliance bond. Not romantic," she said, and something in her voice suggested she had enjoyed watching me arrive at the wrong conclusion. "It is a political and protective arrangement. Documented. Legally binding across 7 star systems. The partner designate is assigned to the young royal's household as guardian, advisor, and advocate until she reaches full majority at 20 cycles." I absorbed this. And then, Kessa may choose her own course. The Queen's eyes didn't waver, as will the partner designate. "Why a human?" I asked. The question felt risky, but not asking it felt worse. Queen Vethra was quiet for a moment. "Because the threats to my daughter's life come primarily from within the Vreth Dominion," she said. "My court is fractured. My generals are loyal to power, not to bloodlines. A Vreth Guardian can be bought, threatened, or killed by rivals without triggering interstellar consequence." She paused. "A human guardian operating under Earth Vreth Accord protections cannot be touched without political cost that none of my enemies are willing to pay." It was cold logic. It was also exactly the kind of logic that had kept the Accord alive for 15 years. "You chose me because of the navigation array," I said. "I chose you," she said, "because of how you behaved when my guards put a weapon to your neck. You did not beg. You did not threaten. You assessed and adapted." She leaned forward slightly. "I need someone who assesses and adapts." Kessa had successfully removed the secondary casing from my cargo tool. She set the pieces down in a precise line and began reassembling from memory. "She's doing it wrong," I said, before I could stop myself. Both Vreth females looked at me. I had the immediate sensation of a man who has just spoken in church. But I pushed through it. "The relay coil goes in before the housing bracket, not after. If you seat the bracket first, you can't get torque on the coil without cracking the mount." Silence. Kessa looked down at the pieces. Then, she rearranged 2 of them and continued. Queen Vethra watched this exchange with an expression I still couldn't fully read, but something in it had shifted. "You would be accorded full diplomatic status," she said, returning to terms. "Quarters on this vessel. Access to Kessa's schedule, education, and household. Monthly communication rights with Earth. You would answer only to me and, in matters concerning her direct safety, to your own judgment. And if I refuse?" I asked. "You return to your freight route," she said simply.
"No punishment. No consequence."
I am not my predecessors, Courier Cole. I do not compel through fear. A pause. I compel through making the right choice obvious. Kessa finished reassembling the tool. She pressed the activation switch. The device hummed to life, running perfectly. She looked up at me then, not at her mother, not at the guards. At me. Her amber eyes were serious and young and carrying something careful in them. Not hope exactly. Something more guarded than hope. Something that had learned not to expect much and was trying very hard not to show that. I knew that look. I had worn it myself, once. A long time ago. I turned back to the Queen. "I have conditions," I said. She inclined her head, 1 millimeter. "Speak them." "Weekly contact with Earth Command, not monthly. Full disclosure of active threats to Kessa's life before I'm operational, not after. And I answer to my own judgment in matters of her safety without seeking your approval, including if the threat comes from inside your court. The room was very quiet. And if your judgment conflicts with mine? Vethra asked. Then, we argue about it after she's safe, I said. Not before. The Queen looked at me for a long time. Long enough for me to feel the weight of what I just said, to feel the absurdity of a freight courier setting terms with the sovereign of an interstellar empire. Then, she said, agreed. Kessa was watching me with those careful amber eyes. She held out my cargo tool. I reached across the space between us and took it. The following 6 days were a master class in being overwhelmed while pretending you weren't. They gave me quarters 3 corridors from Kessa's suite. The rooms were Vreth-sized, too tall, too dark, gravity calibrated for a heavier species. I slept badly and ate worse and spent every waking hour in rapid-fire briefings from a court official named Sethek who delivered terrifying information in the tone of someone reading a grocery list. 3 factions within the Vreth court wanted Kessa dead. Not exiled. Not marginalized. Dead, specifically, because as long as she lived she was a legitimate heir to the Dominion throne, which complicated various succession plans. The most active threat came from General Kovarest, a decorated military commander who had the loyalty of 2 full fleets and had apparently been patient enough to wait for the right moment for 11 years. The second threat was structural. The Vreth custom of challenge rights meant any noble of sufficient rank could formally challenge Kessa's fitness for succession, and a challenge during her minority, before she could speak for herself, was difficult to defend against. The third threat was vaguer. Sethek called it the old faction and declined to elaborate, which told me it was the most dangerous one. I asked to meet with Kessa directly on the second day. She was in her study, surrounded by 3 tutors and twice as many screens. The tutors looked at me with open suspicion. Kessa looked at me with the same guarded assessment she'd used in the throne room. I sat down across from her, put my cargo tool on the table between us, and said, "Show me how far you got before you had to stop." She stared at me. "You had the drive housing off before I walked in," I said. "I want to see what you figured out." A long pause. Then, she reached out and picked up the tool. She took it apart in 40 seconds. Faster than I expected. She laid out the pieces and pointed at the central relay without speaking. "Yeah," I said. "That's the hard part. You have to feel when it seats right. Can't see it." She watched me demonstrate twice. Then, she tried it herself. Failed. Tried again. Felt the click. Something in her face shifted. Small, controlled, but there. Satisfaction. The kind that comes from figuring out a real thing, not a performed one. That was the first conversation. They got longer. By the end of the first week, I had a working map of the threat landscape. By the end of the second, I had something more important. I understood how Kessa moved through her world. She was quiet in public. Precise. She never violated protocol, never spoke out of turn in formal settings, never gave anyone anything to use against her. But, in private she was different, curious, fast-thinking, occasionally frustrated in ways she contained through sheer discipline for a child her age. She was also being watched constantly. Not just by guards. By court members who reported to Sethek, who reported to the Queen. By tutors who logged her progress and her moods. By automated monitoring systems embedded in the walls of every room she occupied. I found the first gap in the monitoring network on day 11. It wasn't accidental. Nothing in Vreth engineering was accidental. Someone had deliberately created a blind spot in the corridor between Kessa's study and the secondary library, a space approximately 8 feet wide and 12 feet long where no sensor had coverage. I stood in that blind spot and thought very carefully about what it meant. Someone had built a space where Kessa could be reached without record. That was either protective, someone trying to give her an unmonitored route, or predatory. A kill corridor designed to look like an oversight. I reported it to the Queen that evening. She looked at the schematic I'd drawn for 30 seconds. "You found this in 11 days, she said. "I was looking for it," I said. "Whoever built it was counting on no one looking." "My engineers inspected those corridors 2 months ago," she said. "Then, whoever built it has access to your engineering team's inspection reports," I said. "Or is on it." The Queen's expression didn't change. "But, Something behind her eyes went very cold and very focused. "I will require your full assessment," she said. "You'll have it by morning," I said. I work through the night. By sunrise, I had cross-referenced every monitoring gap I'd identified against the inspection logs, the court access records, and the maintenance schedules. The pattern that emerged pointed toward one name with uncomfortable consistency. The name was not General Kovarest. It was Councillor Vethsan, the Queen's oldest advisor, the one who had been at her side since before the Accord, the one Sethek had deferred to in every briefing, the one who had, I now realized, been present in the corridor outside Kessa's study on 3 of the 4 occasions I'd found monitoring gaps. I sat with that information for a long time. Then, I went and found Kessa. She was in the secondary library, the legitimate entrance, not the blind corridor. She was reading, or pretending to. She looked up when I came in. "I need you to change your morning route tomorrow," I said quietly. "Take the long corridor, not the short one." She studied me. "Why?" "Because I'm asking you to," I said. "And I'll explain everything after, but right now I need you to trust that I'm not asking for no reason." A long pause. 11 years old, carrying the weight of a fractured empire succession, surrounded by people with competing agendas, and I was asking her to trust a human she'd known for 2 weeks. "Okay," she said. One word.
No negotiation.
She turned back to her book. I went to see the Queen. What followed was not a confrontation. It was a removal. Queen Vethra did not shout. She did not threaten. She summoned Councillor Vethsan to her private chambers, presented the documentation I had compiled, and asked him a single question. His answer was silence. His silence lasted exactly 4 seconds before the guards moved. The arrest was quiet, efficient, and complete. Vethsan was escorted from the flagship within the hour. 3 members of the engineering team were detained by morning. The blind corridor was sealed, and a full audit of every monitoring system on the ship began before midday. I watched the interrogation logs that evening. I had clearance now, by the Queen's direct order. Vethsan had been working with the old faction for 9 years. The plan had never been immediate. It had been patient, waiting for the right window in Kessa's minority when a challenge could be triggered and defended by manufactured evidence of unfitness. The blind corridor was the delivery mechanism, not for violence, but for a planted device that would have recorded fabricated behavioral evidence to support the challenge. Assassination through reputation. Elegant, in a horrifying way. I read the logs twice. Then, I closed them and went to Kessa's suite. She was awake. I knocked on the open door and she looked up from a desk covered in mechanical components. She'd gotten her hands on a broken navigation calibrator from somewhere and was clearly mid-examination. "It's done," I said. She set down the calibrator. "Vethsan," she said. Not a question. I blinked. "You knew." "I suspected," she said. He looked at me differently than the others. Not with dislike. With calculation. She paused. I didn't know what to do with it. "You could have told your mother," I said. "I had no evidence," she said. "Only a feeling. Feelings are not admissible in formal court proceedings." 11 years old. "Next time you have a feeling like that," I said, "tell me. Evidence is my job." She looked at me with those amber eyes, serious, guarded, and, underneath all of it, tired. The exhausting tiredness of a child who has spent her entire life being careful. "You stayed," she said. It wasn't accusatory. It was almost wondering. "I said I would," I said. "People say many things," she said. I didn't have an answer for that. So I sat down across from her and picked up the calibrator. "Show me where you're stuck," I said. She did. Outside, in the corridors of a Vreth flagship crossing the dark between stars, the political machinery of an empire ground on. Factions repositioned. Generals recalculated. The Accord held or didn't hold depending on 1,000 variables no single person controlled. In here, a courier from Earth and a Queen's daughter worked through a broken calibrator piece by piece, and, somewhere in the careful quiet between them, something that had no official name in Vreth protocol was being built. It would hold. I intended to make sure of it. The calibrator clicked into alignment. Kessa looked up. "There," she said. "There," I agreed. The ship moved on through the dark, and I stayed.